Hi everyone, welcome to this very random and unexpected tutorial. This week, because we can't meet in person, I've decided to record the tutorial. You still have the option to go to another tutorial if you so wish. Just please let me know if you're going to do that, just so you can be marked as attending. This recording is more for those people who, due to work or other reasons, can't get to other tutorials. So hopefully this will suffice until we meet again. So obviously there's interactive things that we won't be able to do today, things like our client counsellor practice, but hopefully you can do that with somebody at home, or perhaps you can meet up with one of your peers through Zoom or something like that, or arrange a time when the weather starts to clear. Throughout today, we're going to ask you a couple of questions, but what I'd like you to do is I've posted a discussion specifically under Justine's Moreton Bay tutorial. Just click on that and answer those questions, because that will give you an opportunity then to talk with me. I will give you some answers. Other people can pitch in as well. It'll just give you the opportunity to expand on some of the concepts as well. So that's specifically for this tute only. You've been given access privately if you're in my tutorial. Just go there, answer the questions, and hopefully that will help your learning this week. So, hope you have been staying dry and safe otherwise, but let's get into what we need to do for this week. Firstly, let's start with what stood out to you from this week. So a lot of the topics were covered in the online mini lecture, but some of these were the measures of subjective well-being and whether we should measure happiness from the top down or the bottom up. That is, do we measure our happiness because of the various domains we have in our life, or do we measure the satisfaction in the domains of our life because of our happiness or our positive traits and personality? So the weekly readings and videos went on to look at gratitude and ways to achieve that. And the weekly article looked at how our personality, our strengths, which we'll look at in just a moment, is linked to our subjective well-being. So go to the discussion board that I mentioned earlier and just write in there the things that stood out to you this week from the chapter or from the articles, or perhaps from the videos that you watched on gratitude with Brother David or Brené Brown. We will talk about these more in just a moment, but have a think about what stood out for you. So what we're going to start with is just a coming to presence. That just means using some of these positive psychological interventions that perhaps some of you are already using. And that's going to be a little bit of mindfulness and some gratitude. Don't sort of think, oh, I'll just skip over this. This might be an opportunity for you to just put some of the stress aside that we've probably all been feeling over the last week. What with Alfred deciding to come and then not come, and then buckets and buckets of water. Hopefully that's not impacting us, but it's still causing a bit of stress. So take the opportunity. It's only a 3-minute mindfulness activity. Just use that to ground yourself again and be present in today's learning. We're going to then look at how we can use communication to capitalise on positive events, and how we can respond in a way that promotes good relationships and resilience and positive emotion with us. We'll then use the discussion board to talk about these constructs and reflect. We will then look at the assessment again. Now, I know there's probably a million questions. You know already that it's been extended by a week due to the weather. But if there's any questions or anything that you might want to ask specifically that you don't want to put onto the discussion board, or perhaps feel more comfortable asking me directly, please do so through the discussion board. So, mindfulness, we hear about this a lot. You've probably practiced it in so many other classes to the point where you're possibly sick of hearing it. But until you do try this activity, it's difficult to say whether it works for us. So, perhaps some of you have decided to use this method in your literature review and for your daily activity to see if it improves your subjective well-being. Regardless of that, just try the next activity. It only goes for 3 minutes, as I've already said. So just have a think about what you might need to do to become more present in the moment. A way we can do this before we even consider the mindfulness activity is to use the presence analogy. We need to pause, relax into the moment, enhance that awareness of your breath. Sense your physical and emotional self and expand that sensory awareness. So think about what you can see, hear, feel, sense what is around you. What can you smell? Notice what is going on for you in the moment, within you, but also around you. This helps you to center and ground. So it's stopping the monkey mind, stopping the brain ticking over at 100 miles an hour. It's just focusing on you in the moment and thinking about nothing else apart from what you are experiencing. Hopefully you are feeling a little bit more relaxed now, or at least a little bit more present and centered. Another exercise that we won't do right now, but I hope that you will try to do for yourself. Again, you might have chosen this one to do for your literature review and for your reflective exercise as well. So what do we know about gratitude? How can each of us find a method for living gratefully? So Dr. David Steindl-Rast mentioned in his video that the first thing we need to do is be aware, to stop and to look, and then go look around at what we need to feel grateful. What have we got to be grateful for? Being aware of this, he argues, is what gives us that gratitude. He states that, and Brené Brown repeats the same thing, it is not happiness that makes us grateful. It is gratefulness that makes us happy. If you haven't done so already, please go and watch the TED Talk by Brother David and also the one by Brené Brown. Consider whether you agree with the points in each video, and will you adopt any new practices in your daily life? What could these be? How are you going to become more grateful? This is another 3-minute gratitude exercise here that you might want to read through and consider trying. If you have been trying this, or if you'd like to give this a go, please put something into the discussion board and let me know how you felt maybe before and after. What have you learned by becoming more grateful? Have you noticed an increase in your subjective well-being and happiness? I hope so. The next topic we'll look at is how to capitalise on positive events. So traditionally, social support involves one person talking about something bad or stressful in life, and then the other person responds to that problem, either giving them advice or listening and giving some empathy. However, research shows that people often turn to others to also share their good news. So this is the process called capitalisation. Studies show that both the act of telling other people about the good events or the good things that happen in your life, but also the response of the person with whom that event was shared, have deep personal and interpersonal consequences. We're going to do an activity that involves one person talking about something positive that has happened, but then the other person responding in a specific way that's going to help us understand positive psychology in a more deeper and meaningful way. Now, if we were in the classroom, we would have been doing this activity where you would have been assigned one of 4 communication styles to practice. However, given that we're doing this through a recording this week, hopefully you can reflect on a time when you were responded to in each of these different styles and how that made you feel. Perhaps you could reflect on times that you responded to others' good news in these ways. How do you think that person felt, or how did they respond to you? How does that make you feel now? So the 4 communication styles that we're going to learn about are active constructive, passive constructive, active destructive, and passive destructive. It's only natural to want to share our joyful news, hoping that our friends, our family or colleagues will share in our happiness. But most of the time, we receive that enthusiastic and positive reaction that we anticipate or hope for. However, there are moments when the response that we get might burst our bubble. So someone might react with indifference or a bit of a shrug or even negativity, leaving us feeling disheartened and upset. So maybe you've had that done to you, or perhaps you can remember a time when you did that to someone else. Think about how that made them feel, or how you felt when that was done to you. Such reactions can not only dampen our spirits, but potentially strain our relationship with that person. So if we look at the different types of communication responses, so first of all is the active constructive style. So the responder is enthusiastic, interested and supportive. So they might say, "Oh, that's brilliant news. I'm so pleased for you. How can I help you prepare?" Then there's the passive constructive. So it might seem relatively helpful, it may seem positive, but their response is somewhat muted and with no real inquiry. Oh, hey, that's nice, with no real interest or enthusiasm. Then there's the active destructive. So in this scenario, the person might energetically belittle or reinterpret your good news, focusing on any negative implications. So they might say, oh, seriously, it looks like more work for not much money. The people there are boring. It doesn't sound that great to me. If we're talking about getting a promotion or something. And then finally, the passive destructive. So this is, when they barely acknowledge your announcement or they change the subject. So a typical response might be, oh yeah, what's for dinner? Or yeah, guess what happened to me today? So out of these styles, which do you think has the most positive impact and can boost the quality of our relationships? Hopefully you recognised that active constructive is the best of these styles, as these positive, more engaged responses can build trust and rapport. As you know from Counselling 180, listening and empathy makes you feel listened to, and it validates that the event is important to you. So while listening to these different styles and what they might sound like, perhaps images have come into your head of times that you were responded to in one of these 4 ways, or times that you've responded to somebody else's good news. Hopefully you've now recognised that there's different ways that we can respond. If those images have popped into your mind, go over to the discussion board and let us know how you felt or how you think the other person might have felt. What do you think could have been done differently? When we consider, now that we can recognise these, how do we respond positively to somebody else's good news? So if we want people to react positively to good news, it's only right that you should afford them the same courtesy and professionalism when they share their good news with you. So a couple of tips might be listening actively and with empathy. We know that from Counselling 180. Let them know that you're giving them your full attention. Don't interrupt. Use positive body language such as keeping eye contact, smiling and sitting up straight. Also demonstrate that you're interested. Tell them that you're interested in their news, ask questions, offer some really upbeat responses. So for example, you might say, wow, that's so satisfying, well done, you must be so pleased, oh, that's brilliant, your boss is going to be so delighted, well deserved. So be positive, but don't overdo the praise, or you could come across as insincere, something else we know from our counselling skills. If you can't be positive, be constructive. Perhaps we don't agree, that this is good news. If you have some doubts or some concerns about someone's announcement, don't be dismissive or negative. Try to be constructive and tactful in your response. So there's a couple of different ways that we can be responsive and positive to the person that's shared their good news. So if we were in class today, this is where we would have done this class exercise in our dyads. We would assign a counsellor and a client, and the counsellor would be listening to the client talking about a positive event from the past week. Given that we won't be able to do that, now that the universities are opening from tomorrow, hopefully you can catch up with your classmates over coffee or lunch, or perhaps if you've got time to catch up via Zoom. If you are inclined to do that, that would be awesome. What I would like you to do is take on the role of client and counsellor and then choose one of those 4 communication styles. As a client, I want you to tell your counsellor this positive event that's happened to you over the last week. And then counsellor, I want you to engage with your client in the style that you have chosen. One thing I want you to remember, that if you have decided to respond using the destructive communication styles, I want you then to take a few extra minutes after that to engage with your client and reconnect, validate that client's experience. Even though it's just a role play, it can sort of still create those negative feelings. Once you've done this, perhaps again, chuck that on the discussion board. Tell me what you experienced. What did you observe? How did you feel? As well as doing the class activity outside of the tutorial, one thing I'd like you to do this week is try using one or two of these communication styles with your family or your friends. Or even peers at university, someone who's not perhaps in your class. I want you to observe how the other person responds to you and how it made you feel. Again, tell me about it on the discussion board. So a reminder of these active constructive responses. So remember, we're not using the destructive, we're just trying these more positive ones, because as we've seen, not only telling people our positive news, but responding positively is good for our subjective well-being. So your response should show interest and enthusiasm regarding the event that your family or friends have described to you. Show that positive regard towards the person. So you might say things like, "Oh, I can see that you're so happy about this event. Tell me more." Or you might ask questions about the event. Elaborate on the positive features of their positive story. You might want to, just tell them about the implications that this might have. Oh my gosh, this is going to be life-changing. So to convey these responses, remember, don't overdo it, but be positive and encouraging. Make good eye contact. Show positive emotion. Make enthusiastic comments. Try to be an active and supportive interviewer. Once you've done this, really take note of the changes that have occurred in the person being heard. What did you observe? Did they tell you more? Did they look happy? What did you see? And most importantly, what did you notice within yourself? So at the end of all of that, just reflect on what you've learnt today. Maybe just put on some nice relaxing music during this reflection time. Make some notes about what you've learnt about listening, relating, and increasing those positive feelings if you've tried to use some of these more effective communication skills. Think about how this might change your supportive listening practice and your professional counselling skills. Think about how this might change your relationships in everyday life if perhaps you're guilty of using some of the more destructive approaches when listening to others. What are you going to do differently this week? This doesn't have to go on the discussion board. This is just for your own personal reflection. Perhaps you'd like to keep this aside and use this in your reflective journal for assignment 3. It's entirely up to you. This is just more about your growth and your professional development and personal development. Changing topics slightly now, because we have been talking about character strengths and using our strengths to improve our subjective well-being. We have discussed very briefly looking at the VIA character survey. We didn't really go into too much detail about how to do this and what the findings were. So if you haven't done this yet, just open up the VIA character website. There's the address there, and take the free survey. So just up in the top right hand corner, click on that link and that will take you to the survey. You might have to register, so using your email address and a few details, but that's just so they can send you the findings of what your top 24 strengths might be. When you're done, a report will be available to you, giving you, as I said, the top, all of your strengths, but it will put them in order of strongest to, I won't say weakest because they're all still strengths, just some we might have to develop more, but it'll give you an order from your top strength right down to the ones that we need to work on. So this is me. So my number one strength is appreciation of beauty and excellence. So the number of times I've taken this, completed this questionnaire, that has always been my first strength. And there's no surprises there. I'm the kind of person that would sit staring at a spider web with raindrops on it for at least 15 minutes. Love walking through the forest and enjoying the things that you see along the way more so than the end spot that you're aiming to get to. So I know that about myself, but what I do need to learn is, well, how can I use this strength in a different way every day to improve my subjective well-being? So it's a strength, but what am I doing about it? Am I going out every day and being in nature? Am I keeping a gratitude journal of all the beautiful things that I see or the excellence that I experience? Well, that's a no. So there's room there for me to grow. Some of those others were a little bit of a surprise. Yes, I do think things through, but I wouldn't say it was my number two strength. Spirituality, yes, again, something that I know about myself, but something that I don't actively practice. So again, if I was to improve my subjective well-being, I would have to put this into practice more so than just think about it or be aware of it. Fairness was a surprise. I honestly thought that would be number two because anyone who knows me realises that equality and equity across all people, gender, races, colour, creeds, that is probably, the most important thing to me when dealing with other people. And obviously the love of learning. I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing if that wasn't important. But there's a little bit of an insight into me. Hopefully when you print yours out, you can do the same. You can sort of realise, well, yes, that's me. What do I need to do to make this better? Or perhaps even strengthen some of those ones down the list that could be used to strengthen my subjective well-being. Once you've completed the VIA Strengths quiz, have a look at those strengths. Are your top 5 accurate, or like me, have you found some that don't seem to fit? Are they things that are speaking to your values that perhaps are accurate, but you just need to apply them in different ways to make them stronger? Are you using your values and your beliefs that are important to you as strengths to improve your happiness and well-being? So were these as expected, or were there some surprises? Write down how perhaps you could use these strengths every day in different ways to improve your subjective well-being. This is going to be important. You're already doing that, hopefully, for your second and third assignment, but think about how you can change these. So if you've chosen your task for your assignment, how might you tweak that every day to make it just a little bit different so you're getting the top benefit to improve well-being? Actively and intentionally incorporating your strengths into your personal and professional life can maximise your potential and well-being. So when you've looked at your strengths, all 24 of them, think about what needs improving, what can I do better to enhance these, because these strengths apply across the spectrum of your life, in all the domains of your life. So these strengths can help you with your career path. I would imagine that if you're undertaking counselling, there's going to be something in there that talks about empathy or fairness or justice or temperance, so all of those things that go hand in hand with counselling. If we have these strengths, we can share them with others. Knowing what they are, we can let people know for better collaboration, better awareness. Perhaps we can use these strengths with other people to benefit not only ourselves but others. Being aware of our strengths also helps us to overcome challenges by applying these natural strengths or strengthening them even more to become more resilient. These also help us in our flow states. We're going to learn a bit more about flow next week. But how can we self-care? How can we use these positive psychological interventions to help us feel better? How can we intentionally use them on a daily basis so they become habit rather than something that we have to consciously think about every day? So look for those opportunities to develop these strengths further and further. Take a note of changes that are occurring within you. Let's just finish off now with some brief points on Assessment 2 and consequently Assessment 3, but we will focus mainly on the literature review here. I guess in class we would have the opportunity to ask questions, but there's a spot in the discussion board. You can put on any specific questions that you have in our Moreton Bay one, or perhaps you just like to use the Assessment 2 discussion board that's already available. So a few people have approached me saying, well, which perspective am I writing from? So there's no set rule. You can talk about your chosen self-care practice in relation to the population in general, or perhaps you'd like to talk about these strategies and their use for counsellors or emerging counsellors. Perhaps you have an interest in a set area, whether it be through personal experience or through the experience of others in your family or friend circle. So you might use those strategies in an identified therapeutic population, such as PTSD, ADHD, anxiety, depression. You know, maybe there's a therapeutic population that you think would benefit from these chosen self-care strategies. So this understanding is just going to also help your own knowledge and your expertise if you've got an interest in that area specifically. For synthesis, okay, so it's also, when I say synthesis, I mean make sure that your paper has flow and you're constantly referring back to the constructs that we've learnt about and that are applicable to the constructs you're mentioning in your paper. So if you're talking about, for example, using a gratitude journal or 3 good things or something like that, you want to link that back to the construct of gratitude and how that impacts our happiness and well-being. So it makes sense to link your discovered benefits of the self-care technique you've chosen to the positive psychology principles somewhere in the review. This just shows your understanding of the context and how these tie together. So how does your self-care strategy and the benefits you get from that link to positive emotion, to gratitude, to subjective well-being, to optimism, what else, to hedonism, eudemism, you know, whatever it might be that you think is relevant. So it's then anticipated that in task 3, when you've been using this chosen technique for a couple of weeks, you're then going to relate what you know, what you've learned, and the benefits that you've experienced from using that, hopefully, into your reflection, linking that to counselling practice. I hope that makes sense. Remember, there's a section in the discussion board if you want elaboration on that. There's just been a little bit of confusion, I suppose, because there's so much overlap between assignment 2 and 3. Getting them mixed up is starting to occur a little bit. Make sure you're aware that these are two totally separate assessments, but still looking at the same thing. So assessment 1 is writing the literature review. What does the research say about your chosen technique? Link that to the positive psychology constructs. Be critical of the literature. You know, what's been done, what hasn't been done, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses? Because then in assessment 3, you're looking at more of a reflection. How does this impact you personally? So by using the technique, what do you notice has changed within you and your relationships or your job or your studies, whatever it might be that you're feeling an impact in. So the plan is we will be covering this in more detail in class, but from Monday of week 4 to Friday of week 6, I'm happy if you've been doing this longer, but you're invited to engage in a regular daily self-care practice or a technique that you've looked at in your literature review. If you want to, there is a logbook form on Canvas. You can use that as a resource to keep track of your practice and any changes. Totally voluntary. If you have your own method, that's awesome too. I know some people have apps on their phones. Whatever you do, as long as you're keeping a record of what you do, how often you do it, where you did it, and basically how it made you feel and any change that you've observed. So at the end of each week, you're invited to free write 500-word reflection on your experiences in relation to the self-care activity of that week. So doesn't have to be academic, it's free writing. How did you feel? What did you experience? So suggested considerations in this reflective writing includes facets of the experience when doing this activity, outcomes, challenges, what facilitated it, what mediated it, what made it better, what made it worse, what stopped you, what were the barriers. So these written reflections are going to provide the basis data from which you're going to develop your final assessment. So in essence, the reflection will present a synthesis of your experience that relates to your experience to the literature. Okay. Don't panic too much, probably a lot to think about. Just focus now on assessment 2. We are going to look at assessment 3. The only thing you really need to know right now is what's the benefits of your chosen technique and are you going to start using them if you haven't done so already. And just have a look at that logbook if you think you might be able to use it. Well, that's about all for me as far as the talking bit goes. Hopefully you've used the extra time to do some answering of the questions on the discussion board. Maybe reflect on some of the feelings that have come up for you. Try practicing those positive communication styles with family or friends. And if time or weather permitting, hopefully you've got to try the different negative communication styles with peers in your class to see what sort of reactions you got from that. Hopefully you've also used the time to do the VIA Strengths Questionnaire if you haven't already and reflect on your top 5 strengths or all 24. Do you agree with them? Do you not? So outside of what I've spoken about, there's a lot of tasks for you to do this week. And don't forget, I'm always available through email, jcampe5@usc.edu.au. Those details are available under the Getting Started module. Drop me an email, use the discussion board, and hopefully we'll see some responses on this week's Moreton Bay tutorial discussion board that's available only to you guys. Have a great week, stay dry, stay safe. We'll see you next week.